All right. Welcome. What's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are doing amazing. Welcome to another edition of Sunday Market Outlook. We're gonna go ahead and get the welcome. What's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are doing amazing. My bad. All right. So as we were saying, guys, we are about to get started here. Just sending out these last minute reminders for everybody to tap in. All right. But I hope you guys are having a great weekend so far. Let me get this camera on as well as the screen share, and we'll get this thing rocking and rolling. All right. So camera should be on, screen share. All right. Here we go. Here we go. We got Bill in the house. What's up, Bill? Susie, Natalia, what's up? Hope you guys are doing great. All right. So with that said, guys, let's dive straight into it. Um, We are wrapping up the last couple of days of July. Crazy to think we are already stepping into August. I say the same thing every month, but I don't know, man. Time is just moving. And I feel like when you're a trader and you're just locked into the markets every week, like time seems to just go even faster. So, yeah, man, new week, new opportunities. We've had a lot of great movements in the indices markets in general. So, very grateful to be taking advantage of that, especially with those who are part of the private mentorship within Akashex. So if you guys are from Akashex, shout out to y'all. Welcome. If you guys are not yet involved with Akashex, then this is a weekly call that I do, for free on YouTube, just to make sure that everybody gets a little bit of value, whether you are a paid member or not, to get a little bit of an insight of what I look for as far as trading NAS with my signature strategy called Liberty. And yeah, this kind of just a go way to reset, start the week fresh on the right mindset, the right, preparation of, locking in, getting ready to take opportunities as they come, and just being one step ahead as much as possible, right? The last thing you want to do as a trader, guys, is to, step into your trading week and not really have a plan, not really have an idea of where you expect your, assets to be headed, and then having to play catch up, during the morning time, maybe half an hour before you're starting to trade. I just don't think those are good habits. I think you always want to prepare on Sundays. So market is still closed right now for the next about 3 hours since we trade indices. If you trade gold or forex pairs, you can already start looking at opportunities within the next 2 hours. But the indices market is always about an hour behind. So yeah, we'll be looking at opportunities starting at 6. In reality, I don't really always, I mean, I almost never, I can't say never, but almost never trade Sundays. Just kind of, letting the market, open up, maybe have its little new week opening gaps or whatever the case is. And yeah, just basically wait for New York session to roll around. So that's usually my MO when it comes to trading NAS. And yeah, last week we didn't really have like a huge amazing trade. Um to end the week, I actually had buy opportunities that I ended up getting out of very early, which was super annoying. But there were some students that, ended up just kind of like trusting the trade and letting it go, which was the better move for sure. So, that's the coolest part about why I like to teach, is that I don't ever like to have people fully depend on, me as far as, hey, like if I'm getting out of a trade, maybe you feel like the trade is still good, to stay in, and then you end up making money when I don't. And, if you don't learn to build the trust in yourself, then obviously you can't do that. You're always going to be at the mercy of whether, I'm having a good day, bad day, if I'm focused, not so focused, etc. So in general, though, I mean, almost always on point. But this was an opportunity where I thought about the setup coming in, I executed it, and then the way that it kind of played out towards, those first couple hours of New York session was just kind of like a little bit ugly. And being that we had like a decent week not like a crazy good week, but like a decent week. I didn't want to give back profits on a Friday when I wasn't kind of sure of what the market was doing there. And whatever, ended up missing out on this nice little push towards the end of the day. So I'll talk about that a little bit and then how that kind of transitions into what I expect to start the week. All right, let's see. John, ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás? Willie, what's up? What's up? Isn't the winter more bullish? Well, that's a good way to start thinking about markets that we don't really discuss much, which is seasonality. So seasonality in the markets is definitely a talking point for sure. I haven't really educated much on seasonality. I don't know, like it just hasn't really been a part of my repertoire as far as teaching and everything like that. And I'm not saying it's not useful, but I don't know, it hasn't been something that I would say I thought about like with a lot of intention to like maybe help our win rate or help us catch more trades. I don't know, I just feel like seasonality helps with understanding what trend to expect based off of previous years during certain times of the year. And I think that most of the time my directional bias is actually really on point. Where I have my losses and stuff like that usually is like on exact stop loss placements or timing or things of that nature. But I mean, for the most part, in general, with indices, is that with indices, as you guys can see, they're usually always bullish, guys. So in general, indices you always want to be buying. There's just certain things that can cause for a while to have bearish markets across indices. So, for example, when we had the tariffs, this came right after hitting all-time highs. We had the tariff talks with Trump that ended up, crashing the market. I've talked about this a lot in the private mentorship, but we ended up basically taking out all the lows from April of 2024. So this was basically an exact year after. So April of 2024, we had a big rally. Tariff talks start to hit. People get scared about what that implies for the economy. And that crashes price all the way down to here, which is literally exactly where it was a year ago in April. So this is April 25 and this is April 24. So in a whole year, from April to April, it literally stayed the same after this whole push of a year and then this crash. But then since then, we've seen it completely rally back to all-time highs again. So there will be times where if you follow like what's happening fundamentally with like news and high impact stuff as far as global pandemic, financial crisis with the banking system, tariffs, wars, things that are a little bit serious like that can cause these type of crashes in the stock market, but then eventually you will always have a rise again. There's just so much money involved with especially technology right now. So this is the Nasdaq that we're trading, right? So you can't expect tech to stay down for too long. I mean, it's just I'm not gonna say it's common sense as to like, oh, it's easy or oh, it should be ABC 1, 2, 3. Like trading is difficult, but trading is difficult because of the fear and the money involved and a lot of stuff. But logically speaking, like technology, 2025, all the advancements, all of the stuff going on. There's just no reason for that to stay down for a long time. The only thing is when you have these cycles of market crashes, it's really hard to keep that same energy and to continue believing that when the charts are telling you the exact opposite. But every single crash, creates opportunity for you to what people say buy the dip. um, but I don't think many people here really have like money tied into like indices as far as investment accounts. I think most people here you're day trading it on like CFDs or futures. So like somebody that, has like a 401k or, something like that, they're gonna be actively involved in index funds and stuff like that probably. Then these are really good opportunities in the stock market to like dish out money into index funds and have that just easily rise back up and create new all-time highs. Like usually that's what buying the dip implies. And you see that a lot with like crypto and stuff right now. more than index funds just because of the returns that you're getting on crypto compared to index funds. But like for example, the lows of April to like where we're at now is like a rise about 38%, you know? So that just shows you like the opportunity of buying dips, as far as like index funds or whatever. But so that was a good question, you know, about seasonality and all that. So again, in general, um, you know, like for me, we day trade. So if I'm swing trading, I'd probably pay a little bit more attention to seasonality. But because we're intraday, you know, positioning ourselves, I feel like how I play off of Asia breakouts and fake outs, which is what my strategy is based around, we kind of like already get the jump on that type of stuff, whether we are aware or unaware of seasonality. So I don't know. I feel like if you're a swing trader, you definitely need to dabble more into seasonality for sure. All right, let's see what's up here. What is the name of the indicator on the chat? On the chart maybe? And I have a couple on here to be honest. Like I have the candles, I have the Asian range stuff. So I mean I have a couple things. Fair value gaps. Those are things that we go over in depth on Akashex. So if you're a student in Akashex, you want to make sure you go through the pre-recorded content, my live sessions, all those things. Let's see, español. Bueno, honestamente esta llamada lo hago en inglés, eh, pero si tienen preguntas en español no me molesta a responder y esas cosas. Y tengo mis sesiones en vivo por Akash los lunes a las 11. So for all the people that don't speak Spanish, you're probably like, what the heck this guy just saying? We are starting to develop a really good community for Latin America, especially Colombia, Peru. So definitely super cool to see us impacting, you know, different languages, parts of the world. And yeah, so they're just asking if we could do this in Spanish, but we keep this pretty much in English for the most part, guys. But if they have some, you know, Spanish questions, I try to use my bilingual skills to clear up some doubts or whatever for them. But yeah, let's keep it rocking. So, and if you guys do have some questions for sure, you guys can, you know, type them in here, uh, and I'll try to definitely respond. All right. But yeah, guys. So let's talk about what I see personally for Nas now. So if we just look at these highs and lows that we formed in this range here, we're gonna see if we look at something like a 1 hour, I mean anywhere from 15 minutes to 1 hour, we're gonna look at the last kind of like highs and lows. Um, Turning this off real quick, just to look at market structure, okay? We're gonna see that we had these highs that were put in on Thursday around midnight. So this is like midnight heading into Friday, basically. We had this high. We ended up putting in this low here Friday at around 9:15, 9:30. So roughly a little bit after the New York Stock Exchange opened. And then we had formed this high up here, which came around 12:30, a little bit past noon on Friday. And that is currently like the last, you know, legs that we're looking at as far as price action. So we had this high, we come lower, we ended up respecting this low, very important. So we had this push, pull back, respects this low, and ends up putting in a new high to wrap up the week. Okay, so as far as market structure goes, we are just basically continuing a bullish flow right now. Okay, so in general, market structure wise, whether we, you know, do it from here or maybe we see price come a little bit lower into these areas, we should eventually still make some new highs. We just got to see how far price wants to retrace first before ultimately doing that. So I am still bullish on NAS for now. One thing of significance for me here was this manipulation that we saw at New York Stock Exchange open. We saw price form this wick to the downside that basically, you know, fakes to the downside, um, which is very typical around New York Stock Exchange open, where you'll have like an impulse and then price will fly the other way. it's kind of what led me to taking the last trade that I ended up sending out in Akashex. So if we actually throw this back on there, essentially we had this low right here from Asia. And then my whole trade idea was actually based off of seeing the manipulation at 9:30 and then the shift of structure that started happening above this high and also above Asia low. So this was actually the trade that I ended up calling out as buys. If we actually pull up the Telegram chat here for this is the Koshex official community chat. We ended up looking at this setup right here. 23,245 entry, which is based off of Trade Locker, not Trading View. So you'll see the numbers a little bit different, but this was basically the trade idea right there. So yeah, we had buys basically mapped out since here. So the only thing with me was we saw, hold on, let me refresh this one sec. Okay. So it ended the day at a peak of around like a 1.6 R, which is not really anything crazy. Um, but this was the entry here. And I show that, to recap the trade a little bit, but also to show you like why I also think that we'll continue to see that during the like heading into the new week. This whole trade for me, it was just the way that price started doing all this right here. That's why I ended up pulling out of that trade. Usually we'll just get a clean sweep and push, but this thing sat around for a while. Like this thing was like spiking and doing all this, and I actually expected a deeper retracement once I started seeing that. And so that's why I exited the position at break even. And then it ended up like actually recovering and then moving. And I was like, wow, you gotta be kidding me. So, again, I psyched myself out low key. I didn't want to, honestly, I was just avoiding a loss. And I talk about it all the time. Like avoiding losses will make you miss out on trades. So sometimes it's good because you can have some intuition and you probably save yourself from a loss, but in general, like usually if you guys are gonna pull the trigger on an opportunity, you just gotta accept the trade from start to finish. And if your strategy is on point, then usually it'll carry you through, even losing streaks. But I was just not willing to do that on Friday, and I ended up missing out on not such a crazy move, honestly. Like I'm not even that mad in a way because it's not like it ran for like a 3R, 4R or something crazy. Like it really topped out at like a 1.5 R. So it's not the end of the world. Um, but I still think that again, everything I talked about as far as the current market structure and everything, um, I'm focused on bullish movements. So some important psychological numbers that I would be looking at as well because we're in all-time high territory, right? So when it comes to all-time high territory, you want to utilize whole numbers. For me, like the next major whole number that we'll be seeing is 23,400. Okay. So again, in all-time high markets, I'm gonna usually lean on looking at important numbers like that as far as targets for where we can maybe get priced to. Whenever we start having pullbacks or we start getting back to areas where we've already interacted in the market, then we can use that as areas of support, resistance, liquidity, things like that. But, up in here, we have no data, right? So this is just a whole question mark about what price can do. So all we can really do is look at what psychological whole numbers are we approaching. And so if we get into pullback areas and we're still bullish, then we can look at how it reacts around something like 23,400. And then from there, the next one, for example, would be something like 23,500 and so forth. So like every, 100 points, for example, any clean numbers like that are important. So we'll see what happens if and when we get to 23,400, do its thing, whatever, and then start moving back up. Then we'll expect 23,500, and then we'll just keep that flow going, potentially even up to 24K. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we start actually from a macro point of view, start getting towards 24K. So yeah, again, whenever we have pullbacks into like prior pricing, then we'll have other things to go off of. But all the way up here, there's nothing to go off of. So we look at just clean whole numbers and keep it pushing from there. All right. So yeah, man, pretty much we'll see how the market opens up now in the next couple of hours. If we're gonna end up, basically holding from this area to keep going, or if the market spikes down, maybe we come back down into this area of manipulation and then go up from there. But definitely bullish overall for the time being. All right, let's see. What are we expecting for this week? Okay, we just covered that right now. I need to work on my Spanish. Hey, let me tell you, being bilingual for sure it has its perks. Soy nuevo en Akashex y estoy esperando a que suban tu clase de Liberty en español. Yeah, sí, 100%. Well, I'll tell you guys what he said, not in Spanish, but sí, yo tengo un video que enseña la estrategia en español, igual que en inglés. Yo sé que están todavía terminando lo que es el website de Akash y todo eso. So vamos a ver si eso sale esta semanita, honestamente, porque en realidad es algo que me hace falta como educador para, ¿sabes? Tener mis estudiantes en un espacio donde saben cómo estoy operando y para que no están perdidos en las sesiones. Pero también en las sesiones en vivo, hasta las grabadas, también siempre lo explico un poco más en detalle y doy ejemplos y todo eso también. So, eso por lo menos te ayuda mientras que salen los videos. But yeah, basically, guys, for the people that are in Akashics, we just revamped the website. We just revamped the app. So it's looking super clean, super awesome. But there are still some videos of my pre-recorded content that teach, my Liberty strategy that we are working on adding this week ASAP. That way, you guys are able to, get an understanding of what I look for as far as fair value gaps, liquidity, Asian range, all that stuff for NAS. That way, when we're on our live sessions, you kind of already understand a little bit of the terminology, the vocab, and we can just kind of like get into some more advanced questions and just really trading live together as well. So. How about news? Should we be scared? LOL, there's a lot more this week. Well, yeah, as far as fundamentals goes, which I'm glad you brought that up because I have not covered the fundamentals. We're stepping into NFP, right? So every time you're jumping into a brand new month, so we're stepping into August in the next couple of days, you're gonna have NFP on Friday. So August 1st, Friday, non-farm payroll. So we got a lot on Friday, right? First of the month, NFP, PMI. So yeah, Friday is gonna be very, very active. We also have unemployment claims Thursday. We have FOMC Wednesday. There's even JOLTS. I mean, this job openings red folder on Tuesday. It's gonna matter, but honestly, if we have FOMC and NFP, okay, and even unemployment claims, literally 3 days in a row, from Wednesday to Friday, the amount of volatility we're gonna get is gonna be like insane. So look, Monday we don't have anything, and Tuesday it's really just this, and honestly, like I don't even expect much, which look, it could definitely be crazy too, but usually FOMC and NFP are gonna dominate. So if there's any news before that, it's probably not really gonna do anything much except spike around a little bit. Usually, whenever we have a lot of high impact stuff later in the week, you'll see Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday usually be a little bit more rangy. Like you're gonna see the market probably go a little bit sideways for the first couple of days of the week. And then that's gonna build up a lot of people that are antsy or a little bit like impatient to want to get into positions for the week. So there's going to be a lot of sideways, a lot of, probably liquidity grabs and turnarounds and stuff like that. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is just going to be like the explosive movements. Again, I don't control the markets. I don't really know at all what the hell I'm saying right now. And that's what you have to understand about trading is that it's not about knowing what's going to happen. It's about looking at scenarios and probabilities. And so from experience, I just know that NFP and FOMC, you're gonna have big movements. And if there's no news, earlier during the week or whatever the case is, then usually the markets are gonna build up the anticipation and the liquidity on both sides for both buyers and sellers to just kind of have people second guessing or like impatient, like I mentioned, right? Until those big movements start to come later in the week and just grab everybody's money. So again, I don't know what's gonna happen. If I had to just guess off the top of my head, I'd probably say we'd get some, pretty aggressive, fake outs to the downside and just really keep the momentum going bullish. I just don't see a reason for us to turn around, um, into a bearish market for now. Once we have the FOMC press conference release, um, on Wednesday. And NFP on Friday will probably just be a continuation of FOMC, then we'll see like the direction. But I would still bet more on us leaning more towards 24,000 on Nats, like leaning towards pushing to 24K versus us like completely like crashing and dying. The only thing I would say too though is there's this area, and this would probably be the week where we would see that happen is we have this area I've been looking at around 22,800 that has been like pending for us to get a pullback into because this was, that last real on the 4 hour chart, right? Because we look at stuff on the 15-minute, 5 minute, but on a 4 hour chart, which is a pretty respectable higher time frame, this was a very important manipulation to the downside that we saw on the 16th on Wednesday. And yeah, basically off of that wick, we've seen like an entire strong impulse that has still been continuing up to now. So at some point, this manipulation, we will probably see price swing back into there. And that will be called mitigation, right? Basically, the market created that fake movement, created a big impulse, but at some point we do have to rebalance that manipulation and then from there look to get a reaction. So, if we have FOMC, NFP, and they kind of just want to wash out the market, from all the people that have been buying over the last 2 weeks, this is a great time to do that. For me, the news from an intraday trading to like scalping perspective is usually just an excuse to just manipulate buyers and sellers out of positions. Long term, like if you're a swing trader or an investor, obviously the fundamentals do play a part in whether you're going to have a long-term bearish market or a long-term bullish market. So that again, seasonality, fundamentals, those things really do matter a lot the higher that you jump up in time frames to trade. But from an intraday perspective and day-to-day trading, I think that the news is just going to be a good way to wash out buyers and sellers out of short-term positions. So like all of these significant lows that we're seeing that are printing along the way right now, all we need is the right news event, like an NFP or an FOMC or whatever, with some like drastically bad news or whatever, like conveniently bad news short term for us to basically get like a huge like wipeout of all of this movement to just take out all of these buyers that have been, holding the market up for the last 2 weeks. I think again, like all of this liquidity, especially here, we really want to be precise about it. We'll say like this trend line here. And we'll see price just kind of like boof, like wash everybody out of all those buy positions, tap into that, and then from there we'll see our recovery, something like this. That is what I expect to happen at some point. And I've been talking about it. Honestly, I thought it was gonna happen when we saw this candle here, when we started getting this movement. That was a really strong impulsive movement that I thought was gonna take us there. But after this candle, it just kind of stalled and then it started working its way back up. So it wasn't ready quite yet. But all that really does again is just build up, all of these lows that are just kind of holding up price right now. But that's money. That's money that's sitting along all of those little low points there. Okay, all these little low points, that's just money sitting there. So at some point, we'll see all that get washed out. We'll tap back into here and then make a recovery probably. So that's my plan for that scenario. So again, I don't want to get in a place where I'm like waiting just for that and then I'm missing out on a bunch of opportunity in the meantime. So from a shorter term perspective, again, I'm just really focusing on this specific leg of price here and just looking to keep that going. But the minute that we get closer to like FOMC, NFP, and then we get maybe some like high point that just like completely spikes and turns around, something like that, then that would be probably for me like, oof, okay, this might be the catalyst now for us to start moving our way down to 22,800 to do that whole move that I'm, thinking about. But we do need to see like a really strong spike to the upside and then a really strong shift. We need something like that. Okay. We've seen it before do it, like spikes like this, where we have a big spike and then price comes down. You see this little spike right here, price comes down. It always works out kind of like that. Okay, so we're looking for something like, all of these patterns here. So we'll see. But yeah, this area of 22,800 is definitely a hot spot for me. So we'll see if and when it wants to come down to there. All right. So yeah, man, I think that pretty much covers NAS in a lot of depth for now of what we can expect. Bill, thank you for the 5, bro. I appreciate you so much, man. So much. Always showing love, bro. Thank you so much. All right, let's see. Will you send trade alerts this week through Telegram or Akashics? Okay, Sebastian, when I'm gonna say it in English and then I'll say it in Spanish too. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to send it on both. I'm gonna try to send it on both because I don't know if the app 100% is gonna be functioning like how we want it to. I think that what's it called? Like I already can send the trade alert, so like I'll show you. Let me log into Akashics here. Okay, so if we log in, you're gonna go to trade, okay, and we're gonna see trade alerts, okay? Now, if you have me hearted, like if you put a heart here, okay, on my name, then you're gonna see my trades here, okay? But if you don't put a heart, then you're not gonna see my trades. So for the people that have me hearted or liked or whatever you want to call it, then you're gonna see my trades. But if you don't have me like that, then it's not gonna show. And so the issue that we were having last week was being able to heart multiple educators, right? So sometimes people want to take trades from me and Joel and Arabella, for example, but it only lets you heart like one person at a time. Like now I'm seeing it that it shows two, so I think they fixed it. But like before, you couldn't do more than one at the same time. You know what I mean? Um, so that's really the biggest thing. So I'm gonna still send it through Akashics to keep, getting feedback and seeing if it's working properly. Um, but I also want to use it on the Telegram too, just to make sure that nobody's missing out on it. Eventually, we'll fully go back into just using Akashics, obviously. Ok, so para mi gente latina, la pregunta fue sobre las alertas, si lo voy a mandar por la aplicación o por el chat de Telegram de la comunidad. Voy a hacer los dos esta semana, lo más posible, porque en realidad lo queremos hacer por la aplicación, pero eh, mucha gente, si no me ponen como educador favorito, no está saliendo las alertas. So, mientras que todo eso se arregla o lo que sea, lo voy a mandar por la aplicación, pero también por el Telegram, por si acaso que alguien, no sé, no está recibiendo la alerta o algo así. So, voy a tratar de hacer los dos por ahora y con más tiempo, ya en una semana o dos, entonces ya lo mandamos solo por la aplicación y ya. All right, so that talks about that. Uh, you can only hire one educator. Oh, now it works. Okay, yeah. So it looks like you can. It looks like you could do more than one. So I've hearted 3 educators. Okay, good. So it looks like they're letting you guys finally do it with multiple people. So that's important for sure. All right, cool, man. For sure. All right, well, guys, appreciate you for tapping into this edition of Sunday Market or Weekly Market Outlook. I gotta start saying Weekly Market Outlook. Hopefully, this gives you some insight about how we trade NAS. a little bit of value for, what I do as an educator in the space here. If you again are not part of Akashics, I highly recommend that you guys take that next step of really making this, something that you want to seriously do. Obviously the access that you have, not just to me, but even the entire education team, the leadership, for you guys to get, the information, motivation, the help, mentorship, all that stuff, is always going to be worth, what it is that, we, um, charge as a membership. So tap in. You guys can catch me live Mondays in Spanish at 11, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. So you guys can trade live with me, or at minimum look at current opportunities, or it just depends whether my strategy is active or not when we are live together. All right. But yeah, man, make sure you guys message me, hit the links, make sure you get enrolled. We have a lot of great promos right now as far as getting started as a new member, prop firms, everything. So yeah, man, hit me up. My Instagram is at I am Rich Vendiga, same as my YouTube. So I will see you guys on the live sessions if you are in Akashics. If not, I will see you guys on social media / YouTube live next week for another edition of Weekly Market Outlook. So much love, y'all. Appreciate y'all. I'll see you guys soon. And as always,